my speech is entitled, At Our Own Table, with Our Own Menu, Africa's Moment of Reckoning Again. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1993, the Middle East Insight Journal posed a deceptively simple question. Lebanon, at the table or on the menu. 3 decades later, that question has morphed into the mantra, if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. At the 2026 World Economic Forum in Davos, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney was compelled to invoke this saying to sound an alarm. The so-called rules-based international order is breaking down, or has broken down already. Great powers now pursue naked self-interest with little regard for global norms. Middle powers caught in between are discovering that neutrality is no protection and passivity is a liability. Well, Prime Minister Carney, welcome to our world, our lived reality, for which we have paid dearly. For 104 wintry days between November 1884 and February 1885, the world's most powerful nations gathered in Berlin at the invitation of the German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. Africa was not invited, Africa was not consulted, Africa was not represented, Africa was on the menu. The Berlin Conference produced rules for partitioning and colonizing an entire continent, peoples, cultures, kingdoms, economies that had existed and evolved for centuries. Lines were drawn with rulers and ink, not with knowledge, consent, or care. And those lines still haunt us. A mate of mine in law school tells the story of his family home, which sits astride the Ghana-Ivorian border. He literally sleeps in Ghana and eats in Cote d'Ivoire in the same house. We call it today the balkanization of Africa, a deliberately loaded metaphor. In Europe, the Balkans were carved out of collapsing empires into small, hostile, fragile states, triggering a century of wars. Africa suffered a similar fate, except on a continental scale. Borders were drawn without consent, communities split apart, economies rendered unviable, conflicts engineered to endure. We became a geopolitical chessboard. Pieces moved at will, pawns in a game whose rules we did not write, and victims of objectives that were never ours. We have been consigned to live behind borders that are not just geographical boundaries, but economic, political, social, and legal barriers. And it was crueler. For instance, the conference recognized King Leopold II of Belgium, not Belgium, but Leopold personally, as the sovereign of the then Congo Free State, now Democratic Republic of Congo. It was legally his private property, run like a corporation, not a colony. He appointed officials, controlled the army, and extracted rubber and ivory for his own profit. Ladies and gentlemen, an entire African territory the size of Western Europe was owned by one man, marked by brutal human rights abuses and exploitation of the people, leading to widespread suffering and death. And generations later, the brutal consequences of colonialism remain painfully visible. Small states, divided markets, chronic insecurity, civil wars, deep poverty, alongside extraordinary natural wealth that others extract and monetize far better than we do. Today, even middle powers, some of whom participated in and benefited from our balkanization, are discovering what Africa has long known. To be absent from the table is to be consumed. Some of them, perhaps, are menu items already. So let me ask the harder question. What about us? In the main, Africa might have missed the first 3 industrial revolutions. But now we stand at a dangerous crossroads. We are in danger, real danger, of missing the 4th industrial revolution, involving artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnology, advanced manufacturing. And even as we struggle to catch that train, the 5th industrial revolution is already approaching, involving human-centric innovation, AI-human collaboration, sustainability, renewable energy. But ladies and gentlemen, history is not only about conquest and mortars, gunpowder and bayonets, or even steam engines and factories. It is also about ideas, courage, institution, and imagination. Every great transformation has combined technology with purpose, knowledge with political will. We cannot remain small, insecure, reactive, and expect dignity. That leads me to my preaching for today. The strongest borders to be eliminated are not just the ones guarded by immigration officials. It is that which make us see each other as different, simply based on the accident of our birth in different countries. Let me give you a simple everyday example to illustrate the almost 50 decades old ECOWAS protocol for the free movement of persons. To drive from Accra to Lomé, and I lived there at some point, a journey of barely 3 miles, I need about 8 documents: passport, domestic, national driver's license, international driving permit, local insurance and cross-border order, a health card, vehicle registration, and sometimes even a temporary import permit. Miss just one, and then the journey becomes probably faster on the strength of other papers, this time from your wallet. You go through this at the 2 sides of the border and repeat it on your return. We police each other fiercely, yet open our doors wide for outsiders to extract our wealth with ease. This is not sovereignty. It is fragmentation masquerading as independence. Ladies and gentlemen, our poverty, inefficiencies, and divisions must no longer embarrass us into silence. They must shock us into action. Because at the same time, we are standing either at the edge of new possibilities or tottering at the precipice of a deep void. Science, technology, digitization, artificial intelligence, these are not luxuries for us. They are lifelines. They offer a chance to leapfrog centuries, to bypass the delays of history, to reclaim agency over our destiny. But we must solve our problems ourselves, not through lazy impulse of ill-fitting ideas and solutions designed for other societies. In 2013, speaking to the graduating students at the University of Ghana, I said something I believe even more strongly today. Brains develop a nation, not natural resources. I believe that the solutions to most of our science, technology, and engineering problems already exist, generated and germinated by our brainy students, but buried in university archives, in thesis, research projects that identify real challenges and propose workable answers. Every year, brilliant ideas are presented, defended, graded, and quietly buried. Here, innovation comes to die young. Not because it tried and failed, but because no one carried it forward. Yes, institutions like Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, Ghana Research Industry Collaborative are doing important, fascinating work. But this must become systemic across the continent. Governments must act as facilitators, creating incubators on every campus, linking students, industry, capital, and policy, protect intellectual property, patent innovations, turn research into enterprise, make science and engineering attractive, respected, and rewarded. In 2008, John Legend captured our moment perfectly when he sang, "We are the generation. We can't afford to wait. The future started yesterday, and we are already late." That is our reality. As the novelist Gustav Ehmad wrote more than a century ago, in every human question, there's something more powerful than force, than courage, even genius. And that something is an idea whose time has come. Africa's ideas have been here all the time. What is missing is action. Let me leave you my personal mantra. I believe that sustainable development or prosperity comes when a people, one, look at their own lives, what they do, eat, drink, wear, drive, etc. Two, harness their own capabilities sitting in our universities. Three, replace the surrounding myths, fables, and superstition with science. Four, build industries that make our lives easier, more interesting, and valuable to others. Ladies and gentlemen, we eat kenke in Ghana. The corn dough must ferment over 3 days, covered with a cloth in a dark room. Where is the research that shows, and I know there's research that shows, that all you need is yeast? But we are still preparing kenke the way our forebears prepared it before colonialism. This is not optional. If we fail again, a century from now, another Africa Prosperity Dialogue will be held, perhaps here in Accra, and another frustrated great-grandchild of ours will repeat these same words, or perhaps a robot will. We do not need to be at someone else's table. We do not need to be on someone else's menu. That is the border. That is the barrier. We must and can build our own table. We can and must write our own menu. I speak this way because Ghana, God, Africa, made and gave to me right here at home more than I ever dreamt of. Our mindset should be that it is possible right here. And from that position of strength, we must engage the world not as beggars, not as desperate migrants, but as self-reliance architects of our destiny. The time is now. The ideas are here. There are nearly 1.6 billion of us to implement them. It must never be said that every major civilization conquered poverty except Africa. Africa must not just rise. Africa must shine and answer the long-standing question, can Africa, with a resounding Africa can, or better still, Africa has. Fellow Africans, let's tear down these boundaries, borders, and barriers. Thank you.